So it is my deep pleasure to introduce Dr. Joshua Fishbein, who will present his award-winning cantata, Out of the Ashes of the Holocaust, based on his own grandmother's family story of survival during World War II, when they were hidden by a generous Christian family in the mountains of Nazi-occupied Greece. But this is a particular pleasure for me to introduce Josh, because I've had the great joy of being able to sing in the pop-up choir. And if any of you like to sing, I would highly recommend you join the pop-up choir. It's not a huge commitment. I mean, Barbara's saying, and the choir too, right? It's not a huge commitment. We rehearse the day of Saturday morning and then sing in the bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah that day. But it really is a fun thing to do, and Josh is extraordinary. I've sung with a number of choirs, different directors, and he is par excellence the best. So Josh joined the Temple Micah staff as choir director, pianist in 2023. He brings over 15 years of experience directing synagogue, church, and educational choirs. He's an adjunct faculty member at the Peabody Institute of Johns Hopkins, and his compositions, I just found this out fairly recently, that he's also a composer. His compositions have won numerous awards. So I, again, urge you to join either the regular or the pop-up choir, and my pleasure to introduce our very own Josh.
All right. By the way, please call me Josh. You're welcome to call me Josh. Not obviously not Rabbi Josh, and not even Dr. Josh. Just Josh, right? Like just Jack from, what was that sitcom? I can't remember. Will and Grace. I just have to add that it really has been a lifelong dream of mine to be a synagogue choir director ever since I sang in a synagogue choir as a kid. And it's a pleasure to work at a congregation that has such a strong choral presence on a regular basis. I remind our choral singers at Temple Micah that you sing for more services than any other synagogue choir in the area. And there's just something magical about choral singing. And it's not just a Christian art form, choral singing. It's very much still a living, breathing Jewish art form as well. So I'm grateful to work at a place that has a lot of regular choral singing for all of the B'nai Mitzvah Shabbatot, which is a huge feat, and I'm grateful to the choir for that as well. I know we have a lot of choir members here, so thank you for your engagement and commitment, choir. As Roberta mentioned, I'm here to talk about my award-winning cantata, Out of the Ashes of Holocaust. I composed this piece at the end of 2020, beginning of 2021 for the Washington Master Chorale. So it was composed for a local group. And I collaborated with my wife, Marina, on the words. I'm a much better musician than I am a writer, but my wife is a fantastic writer, and so we collaborated on the words. I wrote a little bit, she wrote a little bit. We went back and forth, and then I composed the music. It was premiered online, so we were still a lot of the country was still online in spring of 2021. And it was premiered with a very small group. Originally, we applied for grants to make this composition happen, and it was going to be for string orchestra and 50-voice choir. And then the pandemic happened, and we had to rethink everything. The benefit, though, is that the accompaniment is so lean that it can be done by groups that can't have a string orchestra, that maybe just have a violinist, a cellist, and a pianist. So I'm going to continue here through the slide. I just want to provide some background on the story. So my my grandmother in 1943. She was 7 years old. And actually, you can do the math. I was born in 1984, the end of 1984. She was born in May of 1936. So she was only 48 years old when I was born. Imagine that. I mean, being a grandmother at 48. So in some ways, she was almost like a second mother to me, because she wasn't that much. She wasn't that old. I'm the oldest of the oldest of the oldest. So that's the way the family tree worked. So in 1943, September, my grandmother, who was living in Patras, Greece, with her family, fled to the mountains of Greece because the Germans started occupying the part of Greece that they were living in. In my next slide, I'll show you the map of Greece and which parts were German occupied, which parts were Italian occupied, and how it changed over the course of the war. So they went to a Greek mountain village called Michaleka, and they were generously hidden by the Michaelis family, which they had never met a Jew before, the Michaelis family. We were only peripherally connected through my grandmother's uncle, who was in the same hiking club as one of the members of the Michaelis family. But they risked their lives and their home to save my family, who are among only about 10% of the Greek Jews that survived the Holocaust. There were not a huge amount of Jews in Greece compared to other countries like Poland and Germany, but the Jews who did live in Greece were very hard hit, especially in cities like Salonika and others. Actually, the CEO of Pfizer, Albert Bourla, is a Greek Jew whose parents were Holocaust survivors from Salonika. In 1944, after the Nazis discovered that the Michaelis family was also hiding British spies, they burned their house to the ground. And at that point, the Michaelis family, they could have said, okay, sorry, we don't have any room for you anymore. You got to find somewhere else to hide. But they didn't. They shared a very small, crude 2-room peasant cottage, one family in one room, the other family in the other room, no indoor plumbing, no running water. And both families lived together like one big family. Later in 1944, the Nazis returned again and ended up destroying the entire village with British explosives that were being kept there. And at that point, there was no place to stay, and the families did separate from one another and find other places to hide. Coincidentally, both my grandmother and her family and the Michaelis family immigrated to Baltimore in the 1950s, which is a coincidence, but not really a huge coincidence, because Baltimore was among the hubs of Greek immigrants in the 1950s after the Greek Civil War. Like, it was among the cities in the U.S. that had an influx of Greek immigrants. And they reunited by chance and remain lifelong friends. And still, my grandmother's still alive, and she talks to one of the members of the Michaelis family on the phone. They keep in touch, and this is unlike other Holocaust stories. This particular story has a happy ending. If you look at the background, this is a ketubah from Corfu, Greece, which is where my great grandmother was born in 1913. My great grandmother, Emily Vallely, she lived a long life. She lived to be 100 and died in 2013. So my daughter, who was also born in 2013, got to meet her great grandmother, which is something that was really special. All right, so a little bit of history. Here's a map of Greece divided into the different sections that were occupied by Bulgarians, Italians, and Germans. So if you look at Patras, which is on the northern side of the Peloponnesus, that little peninsula at the bottom, it was among the Italian occupied zone. So the Italians were relatively benign to the Jews. They didn't send the Jews to concentration camps like the Germans. However, Thessaloniki, also known as Salonika, which is in the northern part of Greece, that was in the German occupied zone, and that was the most Jewish populated city, and so almost all of the Jews from Salonika were sent to concentration camps, mostly Auschwitz, I believe. If you look at Corfu, which is an island on the northwest side of Greece, kind of close to Albania, that's the island where my great-grandmother was born. Italy fell, and after Italy fell during World War II, the Germans took control of the Italian occupied zone of Greece, and that's when my family knew, hey, we have to hide. They knew what had happened to the Jews in the German occupied zone, and therefore knew that they needed to start hiding. Here's a couple of images: Greece before and after the Nazi occupation. There in 1941, Nazi soldiers are raising the German war flag over the Acropolis in Athens. And then afterwards, 1944, the Prime Minister of Greece and others are removing the flag after the Nazi occupation. Here are a couple of family photos. On the left, we have my grandmother, age 6. There she is posing with Italian soldiers in her hometown of Patras, Greece. So she's posing. It's, this is World War II. Greece was occupied, but the Italian soldiers were not so bad to the Jews. And then on the right, we have my grandmother, Josephine Vallely, with her friend from the Michaelis family, another little girl, Elaine Michaelis. They were the same age, and others in the remote mountain village of Michaleka in 1944. Sources for the libretto. So in April 29th, 1984, the Baltimore Sun published an article, "Greek Family in Baltimore Owes Its Lives to Another," by Jerry Cobran, who I believe is involved in the reform movement in Baltimore. In the article, both my great-grandmother, Emily Vallely, and the matriarch of the Michaelis family, Catherine Michaelis, are quoted about this story of survival. Then Representative and future Senator Barbara Mikulski from Maryland added the story to the public record of the U.S. House of Representatives in May 1984. In her adding that to the public record, she included some of her own words, and she also quoted RFK's Day of Affirmation address from Cape Town, South Africa. And so those are the main sources of the libretto. We had other possible sources. We could also, my grandmother was interviewed as part of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, and so we have records of that. We also have the affidavit that my family sent to Yad Vashem so that the Michaelises would be considered righteous among the nations. But this source was the most eloquent. It was already sort of like a libretto. I mean, we had to edit it and we did our own writing, but it wasn't like writing from scratch. Also, it was kind of neat to have these quotes from my great-grandmother, who died in 2013 and was not able to make additional comments. And here's I had to hunt. Yeah, you can't read this, but I'm just showing it to you. This is the public record of the U.S. Congress from May 1984. You can see the title of, or maybe you can't see, but I'll tell you the title of the entry was Out of the Ashes of Holocaust. So that's where the title of my composition comes from. So the way the next part of the presentation is going to work, I'm going to show you the words, and then I'm going to play the movement of the composition, and then we'll look again at the words, and we'll go back and forth till we get to the end. It starts off setting the stage for the story. And these words are primarily adapted from Barbara Mikulski's words and her quoting of RFK. She says, "We bow our heads in shame to remember the deepest wound, the deepest ever inflicted on the soul of man. All our attempts to document its horror, to record its brutality, to measure its devastating impact are in vain. Yet we must remember, out of the ashes of Holocaust, the dream of a better world did emerge." And this next section, this is the RFK Tiny Ripple of Hope speech quote. "It is from numberless diverse acts of courage and belief that human history is shaped. Each time we stand up for an ideal or act to improve the lot of others or strike out against injustice, we send forth a tiny ripple of hope." And that phrase, "a tiny ripple of hope," comes back at the end of my composition. Let's listen to this first movement. Before we do, I'll just show you a quick image. We recorded it at Church of the Epiphany in DC, which is a popular choral music venue. Those who sing in the Georgetown Chorale just had a concert there. Great acoustics. As you can see, all the singers were wearing masks. We're all spread apart. We were very much still in pandemic mode. So we had 12 singers total, plus some top-notch instrumentalists. Foster Wang, who's a violinist in the Marine Corps, in the Marine Chamber Orchestra, and his wife, Rosanna Butterfield. Thomas Pandolfi is an amazing pianist. He travels all around the country playing Rhapsody in Blue and other piano concertos. He's amazing. And then, of course, Thomas Callahan, who conducts the Washington Master Chorale. Let's listen to the first movement. Thank you. So the first movement sets the stage for the story. Actually, that movement can be performed by itself, and it has been. So you don't have to do the whole cantata if you want to. If a chorus wanted to program just the first movement, I think it fits well. It stands alone well in and of itself. From here on, we get really into the nitty-gritty of the story. Movement 2 features two soloists, and a lot of the rest of the story is between these two soloists. The solo soprano, who's her name is Caitlin Ongst in this recording. She plays the role of Emily Vallely, my great-grandmother. And the solo alto in this recording, Natalia Kajanova, plays the role of Catherine Michaelis, who's the matriarch of the family that hid my grandmother's family. And the sopranos and basses all join in as representing the Vallely family, and the altos and tenors are the Michaelis family, and that's how this movement is structured. So it starts off with a dialogue between Catherine Michaelis and Emily Vallely. Catherine sings, "These are our friends from Greece." And Emily says, "These are the ones who saved us from the Nazis." And both of those are quotes from the Baltimore Sun article. Those are things that were actually said. Catherine then says, "We wanted to help everyone." But Emily interrupts her, "You knew the terrible risks. We could not help everyone but you answered our cry for help. And then they sing together. We speak of the past in present tense verbs. Why in present tense verbs? Well, it's like they're still living it. It's as if it is still alive in their memories. Also, that's kind of a Greek grammatical mistake. They get the tense wrong, and that also comes from the Baltimore Sun article. And then the children, the rest of the family chimes in and joins in the dialogue. The sopranos sing, "We were the first Jews you had ever met." The basses say, "You gave us a place to hide." And the altos respond, "You gave away your belongings. You left everything behind." In fact, my grandmother's family, they did give away furniture, jewelry, other prized possessions. They gave those things away. And then when they came back home after being in hiding, when the war was over, their friends gave it back to them. The sopranos and basses respond, "But you saved our lives while risking your own." And then in unison, they sing together, "For 5 months you hid us, or we hid you, and for that our house, your house, was burned." Here's a glimpse at the score. You can see it starts off with a big chord from the. I can't walk all the way over there. Actually, maybe I can. Hold on. It starts off with a big chord, piano, cello, violin here, and then the solo alto sings, "These are our friends from Greece." Big chord, solo soprano, "These are the ones who saved us from the Nazis." And then the rhythm comes in. That's where the rhythm starts. I realize I have a few copies of the score. The composition is now published by E.C. Shermer, and I have a few copies of the score. If anyone would like to follow along with the score, I can give with 1 and 2. Okay, let me put the mic down. I'll pass out the score. 1 second. Don't be shy. If anyone else wants to look at the score, okay. We have one of the. I have. I have a draft version, so you get to see all of my. I have a draft version. You can see all of my markings. It's okay. I'll get that later. All right, so let's listen to the next movement. If you're looking at page numbers in there, they're different for the published version than the draft.
These are the ones who saved us from the Nazis. We wanted to help everyone. You know
That's the second movement. Um, Third movement, at this point in the story, the Michaelis family house has been burned, and the chorus enters: a stone here, a corner there. The house was no more. My great-grandmother says, "You come to our hiding place to all live together." Catherine Michaelis replies, "We come to your hiding place, we all live together." And they say together, "We all live together like one big family." They talk together, eat together, sit around the fire together. This is a very nice family. And that's interwoven. If you find the original Baltimore Sun article from 1984, these are all quotes interwoven by my family and the Michaelis family. They all worry about food, but they help as much as they can. The next line sounds strangely Eucharistic for the people with Christian backgrounds. They bake bread and dip it in the wine. That is our meal most of the time. What do they mean by that? It's nothing to do with the blood and the body of Christ, although the Michaelis family is a Christian family, but they were staying on a vineyard. That was the Michaelis family business, was they had a vineyard. They had a vineyard there. And so they baked bread on the fire outside, and they had wine. They dipped it in the wine. That was their meal most of the time. The Nazis return. We leave again together. We return again together, but the village is destroyed. As I mentioned before in the background, the Nazis discovered these British explosives that were being stored there and destroyed the entire village. And now the families are homeless again. Here's the score. As you can see, it starts off without instruments. This piano part is for rehearsal only. And so the tenors and basses sing a cappella. A stone here. The tenors echo, a stone here. A corner there, a corner there, a stone here, a stone here, a corner there, a corner there. And then the altos and sopranos soar above with their own melody, singing, "The house was no more, no more." Here is the third movement, Homeless Again. A stone here, a stone here, a corner there, a stone here, a stone here, a corner there, a corner there, a stone here, a stone here, a corner there. Thanks. So there are two more movements. They happen attacca. What does attacca mean? It means that there's no pause between those movements. They happen straight into each other. So I'll talk a bit, and then we'll play the whole rest of the composition, and then you'll have time for questions. Movement 4, never the same. At this point in the story, the families are off on their own. This movement only features the two soloists. There's no choir. The choir comes back in the last movement. Elias Michaelis, Catherine Michaelis's husband, he was taken prisoner, and he came back, and he was sick without shoes. My grandmother's family, they also did not have shoes anymore, and they were also sick. My great-grandfather lost two brothers who were taken and killed, not by the Nazis. They were taken and killed by other Greeks as part of the Greek Civil War, which bled out of World War II. Here's a little bit of the score for the fourth movement. The piano part here kind of sounds blues-like. When I was a kid, I played the Gershwin preludes for solo piano, and the second prelude is a 12-bar blues, and there's a little bit of a sound of Gershwin blues in this movement. And then the fifth movement starts off with an extended instrumental section that is meant to symbolize the passage of time. And it incorporates themes from all of the other movements. And then the chorus proclaims, "We found each other again in America, giving all the help we could. These are our friends from Greece who saved us from the Nazis. They answered our cry for help. We speak of the past and live in present tense verbs. Dreaming of a better world, we send forth a tiny ripple of hope." And that's the motto of the story, and it's certainly embodied in the way that my family lives their lives. This is the way the attacca transition works, which was actually kind of a little complicated to record because the audio editor had to deal with like editing the two movements together. So they recorded the fourth movement and then a little bit more, and then they recorded the fifth movement, but starting at the end of the fourth so that it could be seamed together like magic by the audio editor. So the choir enters here in the fifth movement. We found each other again in America. And look at the violin part here. After the choir sings America, the violin part goes bum bim bum bum ba bum, which is what? What is that tune? Right. The rhythm is slightly different. God bless America, but here it has a quarter note at the beginning. It goes bum 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 bim ba bum, and there's also a little bit of America the Beautiful mixed in there. So I quoted that, but also God Bless America was quoted by my great-grandmother at the end of the Baltimore Sun article. So that it all comes from that article. Anyway, here's the remaining section of the composition, and then we'll open it up for some questions. Thanks so much. A few family photos. These are the Michaelis and Vallely families with friends at Loch Raven Reservoir shortly after reuniting in Baltimore in 1956. I'll point out some people. This is my great grandmother Emily Vallely right there in the middle, and my great grandfather Emmanuel Vallely right there. Another photo from the same outing. Some of you might know my great aunt Rachel Vallely Glazer, who was the camp director at Habonim Dror Machane Moshava for many years. Some of you might have sent your kids there or known other people involved. She's given talks about our family's story through Shin DC, Sephardic Heritage DC, and other organizations. Tragically, she passed away at the age of 72. And this is my grandmother. She was only 20 years old there when they immigrated to Baltimore. And here's me with my grandmother from a few years ago at my parents' deck in Owings Mills, Maryland. The story goes on. There was a restaurant, the Krabby Greek. I know it's a funny title. There was a restaurant called the Krabby Greek Restaurant that went out of business, and this restaurant was owned by Vasilios Kanaris, the grandson of Catherine and Elias Michaelis. Mainly through my mother, the Vallely family helped to raise about $10,000 so that Vasilios could open a new restaurant. After the war, my great-grandfather offered to pay Elias Michaelis rent for allowing him and his family to stay with them during the Nazi occupation, and he declined. So in some ways, this is our family's way of paying back, even though, I mean, saving our lives is immeasurable. Here's a photo of us at Vasilios's new restaurant, and so that this is me and my grandmother. And Angela Michaelis Canaris, who was 6 years old, a year younger than my grandmother when they were in hiding. So they knew each other as little girls, and they're the ones who still keep in touch. This story was picked up by the Washington Post. So if you look back to April 2022, we have the article, Greek family saved them from the Nazis. Now they've found how to thank them. This is about my mother organizing this fundraising campaign for Vasilios's restaurant. And we're back to the opening screen. This is the site of Michaleka, Greece. The Nazis destroyed the whole village except for this chapel, which is still standing, and the Michaelis family still owns this property. They still own the land, although they no longer live in Greece. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you.